on your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, the Prime Minister has warned pro-Palestinian protests on the second anniversary of the October 7th attacks by Hamas are un-British. Sir Keir Starmer says too many previous demonstrations have turned into forums for hate and anti-Semitism. Hassan is a student at LSE. He's told LBC it's democracy in action, but there is a fine line.
Thinking about things from a kind of third-party perspective, you're not going to get these people to stop protesting. So I think the way forward is trying to manage it and kind of let Jewish voices be heard. Because if you don't, then the extreme element takes over, and that's what happened in Manchester. So you have to be, I think, very kind of careful about these things.
Thousands of people have been taking part in memorial events in Israel. Prosecutors will appeal a decision to throw out a terror charge against Kneecap's Liam O'Haney. He was accused of displaying a flag in support of Hezbollah at a gig in North London last year. Compensation payouts on about 14 million unfair motor finance deals could cost lenders up to £8.2 billion. The financial watchdog says they could start next year. And England have another win in the Women's Cricket World Cup. They chased down 179 to beat Bangladesh with 4 wickets to spare. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 4 points at 94.83. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.15. LBC weather: patchy rain will move into southern England and Wales tonight. Breezy with showers in northwest Scotland. A low of 3 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. It's 6 p.m. Now, Tonight with Andrew Marr.
Good evening. 2 years ago today, Hamas attacked Israel. What they wanted to do was unleash hell. And they did. The massacre of peaceful civilians, the taking of hostages, rapes and sadistic murders. All intentional because Hamas had a wider aim, which was to so infuriate the Israeli government that it would hit back with such disproportionate force, a much greater hell, that the world would eventually turn against the state of Israel itself. And that strategy is working well. No one knows for sure how many Palestinians, including children, have been shot, starved or blown to pieces by the Israelis in Gaza, but it could be more than 70,000. Anguished protest about this is morphing into calls for the eradication of Israel and its replacement by a Muslim state. Here's our report from the streets of central London, where students have been pouring out of the universities all day and where LBC's Joe Draper heard some pretty extreme views.
I heard you talking about human rights. Are you talking about Palestinian human rights there?
I'm talking about all human rights, but right now the ones that are being, like their rights, the group of people that their rights are being violated are the Palestinian people. So I feel like I should talk about that more than anything else. I think freedom will be achieved when the Israelis go back to where they were born, which is probably America, Poland.
So
whatever.
you mean leaving the state of Israel? Is that what you mean? You don't believe in the state of Israel?
No, I don't.
You don't understand why Jewish students might feel uncomfortable about that on campus today?
No. I mean, I understand why they might feel like that, but I don't think that their feelings are valid. How do we know that that was not a setup?
You think the October 7th attack was a setup?
Yes.
Set up by who?
Yes, they said 1,000 babies were beheaded or 100 babies were beheaded. No evidence was shown for it.
You don't think the October the 7th attack happened?
I don't think the things that they claimed they said happened.
Do you accept that over 1,000 Israelis were killed by Hamas on October the 7th?
I guess on paper, yes, but
on paper? What do you mean?
As in, like, yes, Hamas might have done it, but I'm not sure if this was, like, set up by the Israeli government.
Okay, so that's what you mean by a setup?
Yeah, like...
So you've finally gotten to it?
Yeah, so what I mean by that is maybe Hamas was kind of, like, set up by the Israeli government to kill 1,000 Jews so that then the Israeli government can say, look at all these violent people.
This follows hot on last week's murderous attack at a Manchester synagogue. To protest against Israel on the anniversary of the Hamas attacks, which killed 1,200 people, would show a total loss of empathy and humanity, the Prime Minister says. He worries that Britain is becoming indifferent to anti-Semitism or Jew hatred. This is not who we are as a country, says Keir Starmer. Well, let's hear now from Adam Marr, who lost two members of his family in the October 7th attack. Adam, before we go any further, a tough day for you.
An incredibly difficult day for me and my family, Andrew. It's been 2 years, and I still feel like it's just yesterday. The images of that day, the horrors that were brought upon my family, play out in my mind every night when I go to sleep and every morning when I wake up. And I think it's not something that we'll ever really get over for the rest of our lives. It will carry that memory, that pain, that anguish with us. And that we'll just have to learn to kind of live side by side with that and carry that with us. Partly because I think it drives us to do whatever we can for the remaining 48 hostages who are languishing right now in some Hamas tunnels. And also it just drives us in the sense that we don't want that to happen to anyone else ever again. We weren't able to save my cousin when he was taken hostage in Gaza. We weren't able to save my 18-year-old cousin who was murdered on this day 2 years ago. But maybe whatever we can do, we must do to preserve all life from ever having to experience that sort of terrorism and horror visited upon them.
Yeah. And Adam, what does it do for you and your family to have big demonstrations on this particular day, apparently in some respects celebrating what happened on October the 7th?
It certainly looks like that. They certainly seem to be crowing and taunting and very deliberate about why they're coming out and protesting the way they do. And certainly many of the banners, including the Hamas red triangle and the calls for a globalized intifada, are sending the message very loud and clear what they're supporting. Yeah. I lost my 16-year-old cousin Orly in the second intifada in 2002. She was killed by a Hamas suicide bomber at an Israeli Arab-run restaurant in a city of peace and coexistence in Haifa. This is exactly what they're calling for when they call for a globalized intifada, and we saw the results of that in Heaton Park. So I am very worried about what that means and what kind of extremism is being allowed to flourish in our society, and I think we all need to do our part to do whatever we can to get to grips with it.
Well, you will have heard some pretty extreme views being expressed in the report just now. I thought it was really important to play that because that is how many people in this country, including many students, apparently think. Hamas is not a terrorist organisation. The whole thing was set up by the Jewish state. Is there any way of starting to kind of break down that narrative?
It does worry me, especially for students who should be, they're going to higher education. They should be inquisitive and open-minded. And, a lot of these activists claim to be motivated by love and compassion for the Palestinian people. But for some reason, they draw the line at not including the Jews or Israelis or Zionists into their level of compassion, their bubble of compassion. So I would just urge, I think part of the problem is that, it's so easy to dehumanize people. It's so easy to ignore unpleasant aspects of history or facts that don't fit the narrative. And it's so much more seductive to have a very simplistic binary goodies and baddies worldview. But unfortunately, the world isn't like that. There's a complexity everywhere. And the more that we can remind people both of the humanity of ourselves as Jews, as Zionists, as Israelis, that, we have victims. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're also coming out today. They don't really want us to acknowledge that there were victims on October 7th. They want to kind of, wrap it up into some kind of justifiable narrative for them that fits in with their worldview. There's a sort of an element of cognitive dissonance here that I think, if they didn't have to engage with us as victims, it would start to make them question some of these very simplistic narratives that they've formed and introduce complexity and nuance, which would make it very difficult to take this simplistic binary view. So All I can do is tell my story, my family story. The horrors visit upon us. And the other thing as well, Andrew, this was documented. Hamas had GoPro cameras on their terrorists. They forced my cousin's wife, the mother of my slain cousin Mayan, to unlock her phone so that they could live stream my family's horror onto her Facebook feed, which is how most of my family found out what happened. And I know all of the horrible details. I've seen the execution of my 18-year-old cousin just 4 days after her 18th birthday. The balloons from her party still up in the house. For them to deny that it's not just upsetting. It's a worrying denial of truth and reality.
And as Keir Starmer said, possibly of humanity as well. Adam, I'm so sorry for your loss, but thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC today. Now, the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, told the Tory conference in Manchester earlier on that those expressing anti-Semitism or religious hatred of any kind who aren't British citizens should be removed from this country, including those at the student marches today. I started earlier on by putting to him some of the comments that we heard on those marches.
Well, I'm shocked by what you have told me. Today is the anniversary of the 7th of October atrocities 2 years ago. And to hear people on the streets of London openly saying that Hamas is not a terrorist organisation when our law says they are, and they murdered and raped innocent civilians, is deeply, deeply troubling. The Jewish community in this country will be scared by that, given somebody was obviously tragically murdered just last week in Manchester. There should be no tolerance for this. Those saying those things about Hamas, it's illegal. They're a proscribed terrorist organisation. The people saying that should be arrested and prosecuted, and anyone who is not a UK citizen who glorifies terrorism, expresses extremist views or racial or religious hatred, including anti-Semitism, if they're a foreign citizen, they should be deported.
And that would presumably possibly include quite a few of the students who are on marches today talking about from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and things like that. You would want them to be lifted and removed from the country?
I would want anyone who expresses extremist views or sympathy for terrorism, support for violence or racial or religious hatred to be removed if they are not a British citizen and are simply here on a temporary visa, because we need to send a signal that we will not tolerate extremism or support for political violence. We've seen the dark place this leads to in the appalling terror attack here in Manchester just a few days ago on Thursday morning.
In your speech, you talked about the need for surge policing in specific hotspots for crime, many of them in London, around Oxford Circus and Westminster. And you need another 10,000 police, you've said, to achieve this properly across the country. How are they going to be paid for?
That's right. Well, it'll cost £800 million. The Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride, yesterday set out savings amounting to over £40 billion. So it'll be paid for with some of that. We've identified 2,000 sort of micro neighbourhoods around the country which have the highest rates of crime. That's about 5% of all neighbourhoods, but those 5% account for 25% of all crime. They're up and down the country. The top one, as you say, is around Oxford Circus tube station in central London and Soho, but these 2,000 locations are up and down the country. We would surge policing into those hotspots, those high crime hotspots, to arrest criminals and protect the public. We would intensively use stop and search and facial recognition in those high crime hotspots to make sure criminals are caught and the public protected. I've seen it working on a trial basis in the past, and that is why we want to roll it out across the whole country.
Because this is stop and search without any obvious reason to do so. You give the police the powers to stop and search anybody. Is that right?
Yeah. In those high crime hotspots, which amount to 5% of the country, yes, so in that top 5% where crime is rife, they account for a quarter of all crimes, those locations. The police, I think, should be able to stop and search without suspicion in order to catch criminals.
In the past, this kind of indiscriminate stop and search was, of course, a huge source of community anger and produced riots in London and elsewhere. Are you sure this is the kind of thing that people on the street are going to accept?
Well, some of the problems in the past occurred before there was body-worn video camera, and it was alleged that police used inappropriate and aggressive and rough tactics. Since body-worn video has been introduced, the conduct of stop and search has been a lot better. It is now done both lawfully and respectfully generally, because both the officer doing the search knows it's being recorded and therefore they conduct it respectfully, but also the person being searched knows it's recorded, and so you don't get vexatious complaints or indeed any sort of kind of violence in return. So the situation is a lot better now than it was a few years ago before body-worn camera was introduced.
Let's circle round, if we may, to the original story I was discussing with you, those big demonstrations around the country, including in London, on the October the 7th anniversary. The Prime Minister has said that he thinks this is an affront to humanity and empathy, and people should not do this. If you were Home Secretary, would you be able to ban these marches? Would you try to ban these marches?
Well, actually, I do agree with the Prime Minister in his remarks on this. These marches are totally inappropriate on this anniversary of the October the 7th massacre. At the moment, the ability to ban marches is set out mainly in sections 12, 13 and 14 of the Public Order Act, and it's for the police to initiate the process of banning or restricting a march if they believe serious public disorder may result. I think you could widen that trigger point to account, for example, for cumulative impact, and the government have referred to that, but also you could widen the criteria to include the potentially intimidatory effect on other groups. Now, look, of course we do respect the right to protest and free speech, of course we do, but if a particular group, in this case it would be, I guess, the Jewish community, are being potentially intimidated by repeated marches of this nature, especially on dates like today, and especially following the terror attack last week, I think there is a case for that to be considered by the police as they decide whether or not to allow a march to go ahead. So I think that legislation could be amended and widened in the way that I just suggested.
Very interesting. Chris Philp from the Conservatives in Manchester, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
The Met Police have dismantled the gang thought to be behind 4 in 10 phone thefts, following the biggest crackdown of its kind. More on that next. The time now, 6:17.
This is LBC.
Now, focus on your car. That's right, the one you're ready to sell. See it clearly in your mind, waiting to be sold. We can make it disappear. Just watch carefully. Your car sold, collected and paid for in almost no time at all. It's not magic, it's motorway. Sell your car today at motorway.co.uk.
Our lives are becoming more reliant on electricity than ever. We're streaming, cooking, working, charging our cars, even spying on our neighbours through the doorbell camera. So soon we'll need even more electricity. We could be harnessing our own homegrown energy, but we need to grow our electricity grid to connect it. Then we can make the country more self-sufficient. And leave you to keep an eye on Sandra at number 42 in case she steals your green bin. Again. Moving the grid forward moves us all forward.
For the nappies, peekaboos and tea parties. Mess, tantrums and sleepless nights. All those yo-yos, action figures and shinies. Lifts to mates, lifts to parties, lifts everywhere. For each and every one of those teenage years. Let's be honest. You probably owe your parents one. So tell them about pension credit. It could boost their pension income by an average of over £4,000 a year. Pension credit. Credit where credit's due. Eligibility criteria apply.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
6:19. One absolutely cracking good news story today is the police busting a massive criminal operation which had been exporting tens of thousands of stolen smartphones to China. The investigation uncovered a network thought to have trafficked up to 40,000 phones in the last year. Let's get a report first from LBC's Fraser Knight, who was on the raid with officers.
These officers are going after members of a gang thought to be responsible for 40% of all phone thefts in London.
We've executed a search warrant and we've arrested an individual. At the moment, the search is ongoing in relation to that, hopefully in the recovery of mobile phone devices, which are predominantly what these individuals are targeting.
More than 2,000 phones have been found over the past 2 weeks at properties linked to the suspects. 2 Afghan nationals, codenamed Heron and Seagull.
This is just a sample of what we've recovered so far, and there's over 100 phones here, probably closer to 200 in this box alone. Crates-wise, I'll be honest with you, I've probably lost track, but this is probably one of 10, 15 crates.
But this is just a drop in the ocean of the 40,000 phones they're thought to have shipped off to China over the past year. Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley told us his teams have gone after people at every level of the chain.
We're tackling those on the streets who are stealing the phones, so the robbers snatching them out of people's hands, or the dippers taking them out of bags and pockets. We're tackling the handlers in between that who are buying those phones for 200, 300, sometimes 400 quid off the thieves. And then also at the centre of gravity of this is a massive operation against an international organised crime group that's been exporting phones to Hong Kong, China.
The investigation into this group started last December when a victim traced her phone to a warehouse at Heathrow Airport. Inside, officers found a box filled with hundreds of devices. Some of them weren't even turned off, and noises like this were coming from inside. Detectives who usually deal with gun and drug crimes were drafted in, and 10 months later, the people thought to be orchestrating it all have been detained, alongside 44 others. Watching on at 5 a.m. as police forced their way into the home of a Bulgarian woman suspected of pickpocketing in central London, Policing Minister Sarah Jones told me this is one of the biggest operations the UK has ever seen, by police going after phone thieves.
A lot of police involved, really impressive work across all kinds of different forces in the Met, and this should be really important in getting to the heart of those crimes that so many people are affected by.
I suspect being led out by the police now. Well, that's happening. What sort of message do you think this sends, seeing that happen now?
The police are really joined up across the Met for the first time to tackle this kind of crime, and I think that's really important. It's what the public want to see. People want to be safe on their streets, and that's the priority for this government. It's the priority for the Met.
LBC's Fraser Knight reporting there. Let's hear now from the Met Police lead on tackling phone theft, Andy Featherstone, who talked me through the investigation.
The response to mobile phone theft at that time was if a member of the public was to ring up and say their phone had been stolen and they were tracking it online, as you may be aware they can do, we would respond to that. And if we were able to respond and go to the location the phone was, then, of course, we would then pursue it. And that's exactly what happened in this case. A victim had rung up saying that their phone is still active, and it was tracking to a warehouse near Heathrow.
Because a lot of the time, as I read, these gangs surround the phones with silver foil, which means that they are untraceable. This would just be a mistake by one of them to fail to do that.
Yes, that's right. That is a tactic that they use. They've learned that over time. It's very common. And in this case, they must have not been as on it as they usually are.
Now, there are 2 nationalities that have been reported in this. Obviously, the phones are going to China, where they're selling for very large sums indeed. But there appear to be Afghan nationals and Bulgarian nationals involved. Now, Bulgarians have been involved in a whole series of gang crimes in London and across the UK. Tell me a little bit about how concerned you are about the Bulgarian connection.
Yes, we are. I mean, we're talking about what I call the level 2, level 3 criminality. So the level 1 criminality, which is your street thieves who are committing the actual crime of stealing the phone from people. Level 2 being the handlers, etc., and then level 3 being the exporters. And you're right, there is an alignment to that. So there was the Bulgarian OCG. There was 25 of them that we arrested in executive action. They were the ones committing the thefts on the ground. They were then collating those phones, so there was a level of organisation around it with a group of 25. And the 2 males that you refer to, which was our exporters, our level 3 players, They were the ones collecting and collating those phones from street gangs and the ones exporting out of the country. And it was those two individuals, as you say, Afghan nationals.
If this gang was responsible for 40% more or less of the phones stolen across the streets of London in the last year, that suggests that 60% are being exported by other people. So presumably there are other big gangs operating that you haven't been able to crack yet.
Yes, we absolutely believe that the case. Off the back of this operation, we're now sat on a wealth of intelligence from all the people we've arrested. It's safe to say that even during the operation, I describe it as a period of revelation. We were learning new things about this crime type as we were doing the operation. So my plan is in a couple of weeks' time is to debrief the whole thing, a full download of all the intelligence we've gathered, and then we'll go again and we'll move into what reckoning for.
Excellent. And how frustrated are you about the behaviour of the big tech companies, Apple and Samsung and the rest, in terms of failing to make their phones more trackable?
Yeah, it's a really good point, Andrew. It is very frustrating. I mean, the policing will do what we're here to do, which is to try and catch criminals. Of course we will. But there is some assistance that the manufacturers can do, and they do need to step up and deliver more here. There is an opportunity because the software exists in the phones to enable them to never be used again once they're stolen. And the reason that's so important is that would essentially de-incentivise the crime. And therefore, of course, protecting Londoners, protecting innocent members of the public.
Again, I read that 40,000 phones or so you think were involved in this gang being sent to China. Is this the biggest such grab that you've ever been involved in, the biggest such operation?
Yeah, it is by far. It's about 40,000 phones. I mean, during the operation, we seized another 2,000 just in the warrants that we executed. But the scale at which this crime is being committed, I think, has shocked us. We know that not all crime is reported, and so the 40,000 gives us an indication into the scale in which this crime is being committed and the money that sits behind it.
Well, many congratulations. It's an astonishing story. Andy Featherstone, thank you so much for talking to LBC.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's try and push a little bit further on the organised crime element of all of this. I'm joined now by Annette, who's Director of the Global Security Programme at Oxford Blavatnik's School of Government. Annette, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. I was mentioning there the Bulgarian connection. Clearly this is a multinational gang, not just that it's going to China, but that Afghans and Bulgarians and no doubt British people are involved as well. We've heard a lot about Bulgarian gangs recently, including on benefit fraud. Is this a growing problem?
Well, first of all, again, this is not just a pretty street crime. It's part of a global illicit supply chain. And as you mentioned, there are several nationalities actually involved, and it's not quite clear how they fit together. We have these different steps or the different links in the supply chain. The street crews, and they are local thieves. They also include UK nationals. Then there's the local handlers that collect and process the phones. They test them, they wipe them, they remove identifiers. Then the export brokers who then use, for example, fast parcel and air cargo to ship it abroad, and then the overseas buyers. Now, what's important here to see is that it's really part of a network of illicit flows, and this is something that we study at Oxford in our Accept research project as well. So that means that the same routes, logistics, and financial systems are used not just for stolen phones, they can be used for drugs, for weapons, for counterfeit goods, and even for people. And this is then when we think about the involvement, really, really important, because there is a mixture of domestic and foreign national involvement. We heard about the Eastern European connection, but there's also people involved from North Africa, from South Asia, and generally drawing also on diaspora networks. So that means we really need to look at the bigger network, not just one particular gang, but how they're operating, how they're connecting to other groups as well, because they are basically having a portfolio approach to different types of organized crimes that are interlinked.
So I was talking to Mr. Featherstone there, and he said we're learning an awful lot just with these set of arrests. So what kind of things are they going to be trying to piece together? Are they trying to kind of find out the design, the structure of the gangs behind this? You know, what else they're discovering, do you think?
So what would be really important is, as I said, not just to focus on one particular gang, but to understand the system, really, the structure of the network. So that means we need to know what are the logistics routes? Because they often use the same logistics pipelines to exploit them for drug trafficking, for firearms trafficking, for counterfeit goods. They also need to find out what are the financial systems. So we know, for example, that financial flows run through cash-based shops and informal banking systems as well. And again, that's not just for the phones. It applies also to migrant smuggling and drug proceeds. And then finally, the transport hubs. We've heard about the discovery at Heathrow, but we know that other transit hubs are, for example, Dubai or Balkan corridors, and they are what could be called multi-commodity gateways. So they are used for several commodities. And these are some of the key issues to really get to the overall network rather than just individuals within them.
So this goes well beyond phones. You study this all the time, Annette. How big a moment is this?
I would say it's an important milestone, but it's also really just the tip of an iceberg, right? And that's because we made this discovery, the 40,000 phones, we were able to detain some of them. But these are not the big, I would say the big, powerful brokers behind the scenes, right? The ones that are detained are often really the ones that can be replaced. They're useful to get intelligence, as we heard also right now before. But of course, the overall network, I would argue, is probably still intact. And it's really about getting to that in the end.
So they've got the tiddlers, they have to go after the pikes now. Annette, thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC tonight. Now, as Labour's deputy leadership election officially gets going tomorrow, I'll be speaking to one of the candidates who's just been given an endorsement from an important Labour grandee. Find out who that is next, but the time now, 6:31, and Amelia Cox has your news headlines.
The Shadow Home Secretary has told LBC he's shocked by pro-Palestinian protests at UK universities on the second anniversary of October the 7th. Speaking on Tonight with Andrew Marr, Chris Philp reiterated his comments that those supporting Hamas who aren't British citizens should be removed. The government is in discussions with the EU over a steel tariff hike as industry figures warn it poses an existential threat. The European Commission has revealed plans to impose 50% levies, double those currently. And compensation payouts on unfair motor finance deals could start next year, costing lenders £8.2 billion. The financial watchdog says they could be worth an average of about £700 each. LBC weather: patchy rain will move into southern England and Wales tonight. Breezy with showers in northwest Scotland, a low of 3 degrees.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
Are Robert Jenrick's comments on Handsworth and White only faces an example of the growing radicalisation of our politics? You can listen via our free Global Player app.
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
At Amazon, over 50% of deliveries now come with less packaging, or with no added packaging at all. It's a difference you'll notice on your doorstep, where you chat with friends, where your neighbour's daughter practices guitar, and where we deliver your new noise-cancelling headphones in the manufacturer's packaging. Ah, much better. Reduced packaging from Amazon. We're delivering change where it matters, on your doorstep, based on 2024 UK and EU Amazon packaging data.
At TfL, we're helping to make bus journeys greener. Our entire bus fleet is 100% low or zero emission at the tailpipe, including those for our Superloop routes, helping improve air quality for all. And we'll have a fully zero emission fleet by 2034. That is how we're making the greener way to travel brighter for everyone. Search TfL Improvement Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Greener than total estimated petrol and diesel car emissions.
People ask me, what's my good place? Wild swimming with the girls on a chilly spring morning. And knowing that with PensionBee, I can choose to invest in line with my values, which is why I picked their climate plan.
Last one in by blood!
At PensionBee, we believe that when your pension is in a good place, you're in a good place. Download the app or go to pensionbee.com and be pension confident. When investing, your capital is at risk.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, tonight with Andrew Marr.
6:34. Now, on yesterday's show, we heard from Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, who is fighting to be elected as the next Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. She accused her rival, Lucy Powell, of wanting to throw stones at the leadership. She She, Lucy Powell that is, joined me earlier on, and I started by asking her about the endorsement she's received from Labour's former leader, Lord Neil Kinnock.
I was very pleased with Neil's support because I've known Neil for a long time. You know, he was one of the reasons I joined the Labour Party in 1989, and to have his support in the way that I have is really good.
Now, I had your opponent, Bridget Philipson, sitting in that chair yesterday, and she made the argument, I paraphrase her, that she would be inside the tent, as it were, at the cabinet table, able to pass directly to Keir Starmer, members' worries and so forth. And that by contrast, you are outside the system and inevitably you would be standing outside throwing stones. What do you say to that?
Well, certainly I won't be throwing stones. I want this Labour government to succeed, and I think we can be a better version of ourselves than what we've done in the last 15 months. And this is not an audition for Deputy Prime Minister. David Lammy is Deputy Prime Minister. This is Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. It's a party role. It's not a government role. And I think I can do that more politically and more nimbly, working across the whole areas of government and not bound by a particular department or the constraints of collective agreement.
So to be absolutely clear, you win, Keir Starmer comes to you and says, congratulations, Lucy, have this job or that job. Do you say no to a government job?
I say no to a government job because that's not what I've been saying I would do. That's not what party members want, actually. They want someone who will full-time be their person at the top. I'll still be in the political cabinet. I'll be in lots of political forums. I can definitely influence what's happening. I've already influenced, I think, in this campaign. You know, I've been calling very strongly for the lifting of the two-child poverty gap. That's now firmly on the agenda. I've been saying that we need to rebuild our progressive alliance and take on reform and not try and out-reform reform. That tone has really changed as a result of what I've been calling for. I've been leading the debate in this campaign, and I think I can lead the debate as the deputy leader.
So I'm really interested. You say we need a different direction from the first 15 months. And of course, a lot of the Labour Party people agree with that. But give us a sense of what you mean by that going forward. Not the things you've talked about, but going forward.
Going forward, I think we need to give a much stronger sense of what the purpose of this Labour government is. You know, who we're standing up for, who we are governing in the interests of. And I don't think we've been given a clearer sense of that. And I think we've been too tactical, tacking one way, tacking another, rather than principled and strategic and being really clear about what we believe in.
Does that mean things like public ownership, more progressive taxation?
Well, we've been doing public ownership, and when we brought in a bill, I was really pleased to
Would you like more
that.
of it, is what I'm saying?
Well, we've got public ownership of railways and public ownership of buses. No one even knows about that because we've not been telling that strong story about it. So I think, yes, we need to be true to our values, true to the things that are in our manifesto, but knitting them together with a much more compelling story about what this Labour government's purpose is and whose side we are really on. And I think that's the thing that people say to me, they just don't really know what we're for.
Well, you mentioned public ownership of buses, and that takes us inevitably to Manchester, where Andy Burnham did that. Now, he had his moment at the party conference, and it passed pretty quickly. You're an old friend and colleague and ally of his. Do you think Andy Burnham has gone for good from this debate, or is he still waiting and watching, do you think, trying to gauge what's going to happen over the winter and so on?
Well, I think Andy's got a lot to offer the Labour Party, and I want to make sure that we use all the talents, including Andy, who's got, delivering on the ground in Manchester. Yeah, better transport, cheaper, more reliable, more social housing, secure work, better jobs for people. I think I want to see him in the fray, in the mix, and I can help to bridge that and make sure that we're using all our talents. Because I think when we use a narrower and narrower set of voices and we have a narrower and narrower view of the world, that's when groupthink sets in, and that's when we make some of the mistakes we've made, and we're not connecting ourselves to our communities, which I think Andy does really well.
You bundle together his ideas, and people call it Manchester Labour. Do you think Manchester Labour exists, and do you think Manchester Labour has something to teach London Labour?
Well, I've been involved in Manchester Labour long before Andy was, actually, in a lot of what was going on there.
But, as a kind of philosophical or political direction, I mean.
Yeah, I think, look, what we've shown in kind of Manchester is actually when you bring together public and private, you can transform job opportunities, you can transform the economy. We've got some of the biggest increases in growth and productivity, good jobs, good, decent jobs. But then we've also got the investment in what people need, which is social and affordable housing, better transport and better skills. And that's the kind of narrative, I think, that is what we should be about. We are about, but we're just not getting it across strongly enough.
And you can stand outside the leadership, of course, in the period ahead. So in that spirit, what would you like to see from the budget and what do you fear from the budget? It'll be a difficult budget. So what is your hopes and your fears?
Well, I'm not here to write an alternative budget, of course not. But, I want to see us being much more strongly for fairness and fairness in the economy, because I think that these are the fundamental issues that people voted change for.
So if tax rises, tax rises on the broader shoulders, not on working people.
Tax rises on the broader shoulders, lifting the two-child benefit cap, really strongly and obviously tackling the deep-seated inequalities that we have in our economy, which is an economy that over decades, and particularly over the last 15 years, has worked well for those with assets, those with wealth, those who've already got resource, and has just got harder and harder and harder for ordinary people. And that's why people have voted change so
towards a wealth
consistently.
tax of some kind.
Well, I'm not going to get into that. I want a strong story of fairness. I want a strong story of whose side we are on, and that is about rewiring the economy, not just sort of redistributing the economy, but rewiring the economy, this sort of inclusive growth agenda as well, to make sure that people have got security in work, security in their housing, decent wages, and have got enough money that they can actually get a bit of dignity and joy in their lives, which they haven't had.
Now, in terms of whose side we are on, you've seen these big demonstrations today on the second anniversary of the October 7th attacks, and people in the street calling for intifada, saying that Israel is Arab, people telling LBC earlier on that Hamas is not a terrorist organisation. How concerned are you about the anti-Semitic tone in parts of the country?
Well, I mean, those comments are just completely wrong and abhorrent, and to come on the 2-year anniversary of that awful, horrific Hamas attack against Jewish people for being Jewish, is deeply wrong. And we've got to call that out for what it is. And there's been a worrying rise in anti-Semitism across the country in recent months, and we've got to be really clear with people that you cannot put at the door of British Jews or any Jew the actions of the what the Netanyahu government are doing. That is anti-Semitic. That is wrong. But we can still care deeply about what's happening in Palestine and Gaza, which we do. But we've got to get the tone of that right.
You're a Manchester MP. A lot of other Labour Manchester MPs have written a letter saying that they are really worried about the proposed Bob Vylan concert on the 5th of November at Manchester Academy and pleading on the organisers to pull it. You haven't signed that letter. Why not?
Well, I have made my own representations, and I spoke to the Jewish Leadership Council about this before what happened last week, in fact. And I think it was probably asked to sign it when I was still in government, and so there's kind of signing these round-robin letters. But let's just be absolutely clear.
You agree with the sentiment?
I agree with the sentiment completely, and I've made my own representations. And I think it would be wrong for that concert. I think it would have been wrong for that concert to have happened anyway, but particularly now.
It has been difficult, I'm sure, for you and Bridget to be in this contest sort of head-to-head. What are your feelings about her now? Are you still, under the surface, reasonably good allies?
Absolutely. Look, I mean, I've been very positive in this campaign. I'm talking about what I will bring to the contest, what I will bring as deputy leader, and I've tried to be really positive about that. I think Bridget has got great strength. She's been a good education secretary. I just think I can bring something extra, something additional, and something more independent, and I think that's what members are looking for. But I'm not going to, I think kind of Project Fear, I'll leave that to others because I think we should just be positive about this campaign.
Well, Labour members will get their say from tomorrow morning. So, Lucy Powell, thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And, of course, Lucy Powell and Bridget Phillipson are only engaged in this deputy leadership campaign because of the reshuffle, the Angela Rayner reshuffle. And Aggie Shornbury, LBC's correspondent, can now tell us about the reverberations from that, which are carrying on.
Which are carrying on indeed, Andrew. So you'll remember that there was the reshuffle of the political cabinet, of course, started off by Angela Rayner's departure. And then there was also the number 10 reshuffle happening inside. And they got rid of a lot of kind of top brass in number 10 and got rid of some people within the policy unit. And I can actually tell you tonight, Andrew, more people within the policy unit, key people, lots of people won't have heard of them, but key people within Keir Starmer's project are now also departing from number 10. So one of them, Munira Lula, she is one of Keir Starmer's kind of longest serving aides. She was in opposition, head of domestic policy, very, very well respected inside government. She was with Angela Rayner. She is very close to unions too. And she was also a key part of the team that wrote the 2024 manifesto. Another person who had an influence in the 2024 manifesto is also someone who's leaving. That's Caris Roberts. Now, she was also a special advisor in the policy team, and she was the executive director of the progressive think tank IPPR. They are both leaving. Now, why this is also interesting is because people in government think that they are losing very, very political people and instead replacing them with sort of experts in the field who don't have relationships with the Parliamentary Labour Party, don't have links with other people in government. And that is something they are worried about going forward.
Doesn't sound like great news. Very, very quickly, Lucy Powell or Bridget Phillipson, who's going to win?
Well, it looks like from that one poll that was done on Labour by Labour members that it will be Lucy Powell. But, maybe
we'll know soon
listeners of your show will have different views. They've heard from both of them in the last 2 days.
All right, Aggie, thank you very much indeed. Now, we heard earlier from the Conservative conference where it has been a very busy day. The Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, much tipped as a future leader, took aim at judges who he said were connected to pro-migration charities. He's also been criticised for Labour for saying he visited part of Birmingham and found himself the only white face there. Let's hear now from LBC's political editor Natasha Clark in Manchester for us, listening hard all day. Natasha, hard to judge accurately from London, but it didn't seem to me that Robert Jenrick's speech in terms of tone and delivery was quite all he was hoping for.
Good evening, Andrew. Yes, it has been Law and Order Day here in Manchester, hearing from Chris Philp and, of course, from Robert Jenrick, as you've been saying. Robert Jenrick announcing those plans to curb the powers of judges. I think those did go down quite well in the hall, actually, essentially saying that they should be scrapped. The Liberal Democrats have dubbed those as Trumpian-style plans to essentially get politicians to pick who should be serving on our judges. Brandishing a wig on the Tory party conference stage, he promised to root out those activist judges. But like you say, Andrew, all anybody is really talking about today is what is widely being seen as a Labour-planted story timed for today. He's got into quite a lot of hot water, I think it's fair to say, for some of those comments that he made back at this event in March, first reported by the Guardian newspaper. He spoke about visiting a part of Birmingham, Handsworth, where he didn't see any white people. He said that he wanted to see a country where people were properly integrated. The West Midlands Mayor, Richard Parker, accusing him of racism. Mr Jenrick defending those comments today. Kemi Badenoch as well this evening has done exactly the same thing. They both say that high levels of immigration are damaging communities. They say politicians must not look away for fear of being labelled racist. But they have got quite a backlash, Andrew. However, I think it will be seen probably as quite a good thing that the public is at least listening to something that is coming out of here, out of the Tory party conference in Manchester. They're not squabbling about the party leadership. They're not talking quite as much about Nigel Farage as I thought, or in fact anything else.
OK, Tash, thank you very much indeed. I hope we're going to be talking tomorrow about Kemi Badenoch's big speech. But for now, thank you very, very much indeed. And coming up, I'm going to get reaction to those comments from Robert Jenrick, from the Labour Mayor for the West Midlands, Richard Parker, referred to just now. The time now, 6:47.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
Two subjects tonight, the protests on the anniversary of October the 7th and Robert Jenrick's apparently incendiary remarks about no white faces in Handsworth. Hold on to your hats.
Ian Dale on LBC.
Take advantage of the Kia electric car allowance to drive the Kia EV3, this year's UK and World Car of the Year, or the new EV4, the Times Electric Car of the Year 2025, with a range of up to 388 miles. Get up to £3,750 towards your PCP finance deposit contribution and 3.9% APR representative until the 16th of December. Search the Kia electric car allowance today.
Kia. Movement that inspires.
Range based on test conditions and may vary. T's and C's apply. Kia Finance.
When you're smiling. Banning Dental Group clinics. With over 5,000 top-rated Google reviews. Keep on smiling.
At TfL, we're helping to make bus journeys greener. Our entire bus fleet is 100% low or zero emission at the tailpipe, including those for our Superloop routes, helping improve air quality for all. And we'll have a fully zero-emission fleet by 2034. That is how we're making the greener way to travel brighter for everyone. Search TfL Improvement Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Greener than total estimated petrol and diesel car emissions.
Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is £14 million. I think that deserves a whoop whoop. Whoop whoop! Thank you, faraway person. Get in tonight's Euro Millions draw. Play on app.
Estimated jackpot. Account terms, rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over.
This is LBC Tonight with Andrew Marr.
6:49. Now let's get more on Robert Jenrick and hear those comments from that secret recording that wound up in this morning's Guardian.
The other thing that I noticed there was that it was one of the worst integrated places that I've ever been to. In fact, in the hour and a half that I was filming with news there, I didn't see another white face. And that's not the kind of country I want to live in. I want to live in a country where people are properly integrated. It's not about the colour of your skin or your faith. Of course it isn't. But I want people to be living alongside each other, not parallel lives.
I'm not quite sure where that sentiment, Richard Parker, who's the mayor for the area and knows it very well, I'm not quite sure what those sentiments would lead to in policy terms. But what do you make of that description of Handsworth, first of all?
I thought the comments made by Robert Jenrick were frankly disgraceful. They're divisive and they're damaging. I know the community in Handsworth really well. It's a part of the city of Birmingham I visit regularly. I spend a lot of time working with the Soho Road Business Improvement District that won one of the most vibrant high streets in Birmingham, where people, not just from the region, but from the country and globally visit to shop. It's a community that is very hospitable, very welcoming and very generous. Indeed, just a few Sundays ago, I spent the afternoon at a Sikh soup kitchen where the Sikh community provide warm food and hot food for members of the community that are frankly living very difficult lives.
Yeah. It's obviously a warm community and got many things going for it, though there is the bin strike going on at the moment. But if you look at the figures from Birmingham City Council, it isn't very white either. I think more than 60% of people living there are Pakistani, Indian or Bangladeshi, and only 9% are white.
Robert Jenrick chose to make a statement about that community based on the colour of the people there. I think that's fundamentally wrong. It's a great community. It's very vibrant and very supportive and very welcoming. He should. I question why he wasn't focusing on the issues I focused on today. How welcoming it is, how supportive it is, and how generous the people there are. He chose to make a point and tried to make a negative point about that place based on the colour of people that live there. I think that's wrong. I think it's dangerous and it's damaging.
Is it racist?
The comments that he made, I believe, are racist. And I've had feedback this morning from my friends who live there, the people I know who run businesses there, and they were in shock and appalled. And perhaps more importantly, they believe those comments were racist. And many of them told me they went to work today in their accountants' offices, in their shops, in their cafes, and for the first 1 or 2 hours at work, they said they had to take a second breath. They couldn't quite believe that the place that they built a business in and a life in, a place which they really valued, had been subject to the type of comments that a very senior Conservative politician had made.
Jenrick went on to say that he wasn't talking about race or religion, but he wanted more mingling, if you like, of different people, more communities mingling properly together. And there are areas around the country where there is one very, homogenous group. Isn't that a problem?
I want to focus on the strength of our communities, not division. And as I commented this morning, he chose to go to Handsworth to make a statement, and he chose to make a statement at a Conservative Party fundraiser about Handsworth by focusing on one issue and one matter, the colour of people's skin. I would ask Robert Jenrick why he chose Handsworth to make that statement, and would he go to a largely white community, and there are many of those in around the West Midlands, to make a similar statement about that community? I believe he wouldn't, and I believe he set out with the intent of making damaging comments about that community in Handsworth, and he used the colour of people's skin to reinforce the negative comments he wanted to make.
Do you think this is partly about the competition with reform that the Conservatives are engaged in?
You need to ask, Robert Jenrick about exactly why he made those statements. But I think it's really unwelcome that a mainstream party, the Conservative Party, has senior members of its shadow cabinet holding views like Robert Jenrick had. And indeed, he made those comments at a fundraiser when there had been senior, most likely, I don't know with that certainty, but the MP would typically host one of those fundraisers and party members would have been there. And the fact that none of those people attending that fundraiser called Robert Jenrick out or challenged him is equally concerning to me, and it ought to be equally concerning to many, many voters in many of our communities across Birmingham and the wider region.
Richard Parker, before I leave you, you've been talking about the Conservative Party. Just on your own party, we were just discussing Andy Burnham a moment ago with Lucy Powell. Do you see him as somebody who is going to be heavily engaged in the debate about the future of the government in the next 6 months?
Andy Burnham is a fantastic mayor in Greater Manchester. When I was standing for election and campaigning, he was very supportive of me. Like myself, Andy stood for and committed to serving a full term as mayor. I plan to, and I believe Andy wants to. But I'd also say that all of us are in elected positions in the Labour Party, want to and are committed to doing everything we can to ensure the government delivers on its promises and we successfully win the next general election. And that's what we're all committed to. And Andy and myself, I think, are in exactly the same place on that.
All right, Richard Parker, thank you very much indeed for coming in and talking to me.
OK, thank you.
Now, an LBC story next, investigating a security breach at an army base in Wiltshire. A wire fence was cut and fuel was stolen from a tanker at Larkhill Barracks over the weekend. I'm joined now by our reporter, Henry Riley, who broke the story.
Andrew, good evening. Yes, this happened on Saturday night at the Royal Artillery Barracks at Larkhill. That's in Wiltshire, near Salisbury, for a bit of context. And I learned that Operation Wide Awake had been triggered. Now, what that means is that the troops there effectively are put on high alert. They're told to be visible. They're told to be more aware. There's been an investigation launched subsequently by the Royal Military Police and by Wiltshire Police. And what happened, as you outlined, is that intruders got access to this key military site by cutting through a wire fence. They were then able to steal fuel from an oil tanker. Now, it's unclear who that belonged to. It appears it belonged to a civilian contractor, but nonetheless, it's very worrying when you look at what they have at that site. So, for instance, they have heavy artillery ammunition, missiles. They have watchkeeper surveillance drones, some of the long-range missiles we've sent to Ukraine. And seemingly someone was able to get access so easily, intruders. I spoke with Tan Desi earlier on, who's the Labour MP. He chairs the House of Commons Defence Select Committee and said the government need to make the security at these barracks a priority.
Another break-in has just occurred doesn't exactly inspire confidence in the new measures taken. The safety of military bases is utterly paramount to our national security and the safeguarding of the personnel who work and live there.
James Cartledge as well, the Shadow Defence Secretary, when he was asked about the story with our colleague Sheila Fogarty, said the government need to provide answers.
I'm very concerned. If Larkhill, we don't know the full picture, but given what you've reported and taking that at face value, it looks like another serious incident at base. What are Labour doing in terms of improving security at our bases? I think it's a very serious question, and I think they need to come clean on what's happened.
And of course, back in June, Palestine Action broke into RAF Bryce Norton.
We remember it well, with the red paint. And all
quite. That. Yeah. And this, no suggestion there's any link here, but it's just being able to get access to those sites so
because
easily.
Because at the time they said this is not going to happen again. We're going to really tighten up the security. Just you watch us.
Quite. And the fact that this has some of that key equipment is very worrying. The last thing to tell you, Andrew, Danny Kruger, the local MP, has now written to the Defence Secretary. The Lib Dems are calling for an urgent investigation. We have heard from the Ministry of Defence, who say that the RMP, the Royal Military Police, are investigating, but it did not impact the operational output and that security at the base is a priority for them.
Great story there from Henry Scoop Riley. Thank you so much for bringing it to us. If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion. You can put your news categories in the order you'd like them. You can pause, you can rewind live radio and listen to a range of podcasts. Download the all-new official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, it's Ben Kentish. But right now, it's time for Ian Dale.
Thanks, Andrew.
In the hour and a half that I was filming, I didn't see another white face. And that's not the kind of country I want to live in.
Are these remarks by Robert Jenrick a bit sub-Enoch Powell, or does he point to a real issue in some of our cities, where some ethnic groups have become separated from a blended society? Today is the anniversary of the Hamas terrorist attack on Israel. What on earth would possess anyone to go out on the streets and disrespect the people who were killed in that heinous attack?